someone invests in you, they unconsciously begin to root for you. Their identity gets partially tied to your success, your survival, your approval. They begin to protect what they have helped build. Used with precision, the Ben Franklin effect can subtly erode hostility and turn indifference into alliance. Manipulators exploit it by planting small requests, lending a pen, explaining a task, offering advice, each one a silent hook. By the time their target realizes what's happening, their emotions are entangled in a false sense of loyalty. What makes this effect dangerous is its invisibility. The one being influenced feels noble for helping. Their ego is reinforced. They feel generous, open-hearted, even wise. But underneath, their brain is rewriting emotional scripts without their conscious permission. The enemy becomes a friend, not because of changed values, but because of a borrowed book. The mind doesn't always follow the truth. It follows the path of least resistance. Triangulation. Triangulation is a manipulative psychological strategy where a third party is brought into a two-person dynamic to create tension, confusion, or rivalry. At its core, triangulation is about control, using indirect communication, comparison, or gossip to destabilize relationships and assert dominance without ever appearing overtly aggressive. It's one of the most insidious tactics used by narcissists, toxic partners, or power-hungry leaders to keep others unbalanced and emotionally dependent. Imagine confiding in someone, believing you have a private bond, only to realize later they've shared parts of your conversation with another person, twisting your words just enough to cause doubt. Or worse, they've subtly praised someone else in your presence, just enough to make you feel insecure, inferior, or excluded. That's triangulation. It's not always loud or confrontational. It thrives in whispers, glances, carefully chosen words, and strategic silence. The power of triangulation lies in its emotional dissonance. When someone uses it against you, you start questioning yourself. Why do I suddenly feel replaced? Why am I jealous? Why do I need to prove my worth? These questions chip away at your self-esteem, making you more pliable and eager to regain your sense of value in the eyes of the manipulator. The more confused and emotionally reactive you become, the more control they gain. This tactic often appears in romantic relationships where one partner flirts with or references others just enough to trigger insecurity. It's seen in families where a parent pits siblings against each other to maintain authority, or in workplaces where a boss praises one employee in front of another to breed quiet competition. The result? Loyalty is fractured, unity dissolves, and the manipulator stands at the center, untouchable, needed, in control. What makes triangulation emotionally devastating is the illusion it creates. You believe the real problem is the third person, your rival, but the real weapon is the orchestrator. They provoke reactions, then step back, claiming innocence. You're left feeling paranoid, desperate for approval, unsure of what's real. The more you chase clarity, the deeper you fall into their web. That's the brilliance of triangulation. It makes you question others, then yourself, until the only stable point in the chaos seems to be the very person who caused it. Negative reinforcement loop. The negative reinforcement loop is a psychological trap where behaviors are shaped and controlled through the strategic removal of discomfort, not by offering rewards, but by making relief feel like a gift. It's a manipulation that operates in cycles, quietly tightening its grip every time you comply, just to escape the emotional or psychological strain inflicted upon you. What makes this technique so effective and dangerous is that it doesn't look like control at first. It feels like relief. Picture a situation where someone criticizes you, gives you the silent treatment, or makes you feel unwanted, anxious, or afraid. Then, suddenly, once you apologize, comply, or change your behavior, the discomfort disappears. They're warm again. They smile. They talk to you like nothing happened. Your brain, desperate to avoid that emotional punishment again, locks onto the pattern. Do what they want, and the pain stops. This loop doesn't reward you with genuine affection. It conditions you like an animal avoiding a shock. And over time, this avoidance becomes your prison. You walk on eggshells. You preempt their moods. You suppress your needs, your voice, and even your identity, just to avoid triggering that punishment again. But the rules are always shifting. That's the point. You're not supposed to win, just to keep chasing the feeling of okay. In toxic relationships, romantic, familial, or professional, this loop becomes the foundation of power. The manipulator never has to shout or physically threaten. All they need to do is make you feel bad when you resist and make that bad feeling go away when you obey. It's subtle, it's cyclical, and it erodes your sense of autonomy without you ever realizing how deep it's gone. The most terrifying part of a negative reinforcement loop is how it rewires your emotional instincts. You begin to associate peace not with real love or connection, but with compliance, with silence, with surrender. You start thanking the person who hurt you simply for not hurting you today. And so the loop continues, not because you want it, but because your nervous system can't take the pain of saying no. The escape becomes the trap. Intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is one of the most psychologically addictive manipulation tactics ever discovered. It works not by providing consistent rewards, but by delivering them unpredictably, creating a powerful emotional dependence in the victim. This technique isn't just manipulation, it's emotional gambling, and it turns people into addicts, not to substances, but to other people's approval, affection, or attention. Imagine someone treats you with warmth, validation, and love, then suddenly pulls away, becomes cold, dismissive, or even cruel. You're left confused, anxious, trying to figure out what you did wrong. Then, just when you're about to give up or confront them, they shower you with affection again. They smile, compliment you, act like nothing happened. Your heart floods with relief. That moment of pleasure becomes your fix. And so you stay, you wait, you hope, and the cycle repeats. The unpredictability is the hook. Unlike consistent reinforcement, which builds trust, intermittent reinforcement builds obsession. It mirrors the same psychological patterns found in slot machines and gambling addiction. You never know when the reward is coming, so your brain works overtime trying to earn it. Dopamine surges not when you receive the reward, but when you anticipate it. That anticipation becomes a drug. In relationships, this tactic turns toxic partners into gods. They control when you feel loved and when you feel worthless. They don't need to physically trap you. You trap yourself, desperately trying to win back the version of them that once made you feel alive. You remember the highs so vividly, they eclipse the abuse. You excuse the bad because you're starving for the good. What makes intermittent reinforcement especially cruel is that it's unpredictable by design. The manipulator gives you just enough to keep your hope alive, but never enough to feel secure. You're constantly chasing an emotional jackpot that may never come again. And even when you know it's damaging, the attachment feels unbreakable. You crave the very person who's breaking you. This isn't love, it's programming. And by the time you realize you're being conditioned, the hook is already buried in your psyche, deep enough to make you feel that the pain is worth it, as long as there's a chance of feeling that rush one more time. Covert contracts. Covert contracts are unspoken, invisible agreements that one person creates in their mind without ever telling the other person. They're built on the belief that if I do this for you, then you will do that for me, even though the expectation is never communicated aloud. It's a silent transaction rooted in manipulation, resentment, and suppressed needs disguised as kindness. Someone who uses a covert contract might bend over backward for you, help you move, listen to your problems, go out of their way to make you feel cared for. On the surface, it looks generous. It looks like love. But underneath, There's an invisible debt being tallied. They believe you owe them something. Your time, loyalty, affection, sex, commitment, something they feel entitled to, simply because they played the good person. The trap of the covert contract is emotional blackmail wrapped in niceness. You're being set up to disappoint someone without knowing it. When you don't fulfill their secret expectation, they don't say, "I was hoping for this." Instead, they lash out, withdraw, act cold, or guilt trip you. And you're left confused. What did I do wrong? The answer is, you violated a contract you never agreed to in the first place. This tactic is common in relationships, especially when one partner is afraid of rejection or direct communication. Instead of stating their desires clearly, they hide them inside acts of service. They hope that if they prove themselves valuable, you'll naturally give them what they want in return. But when that doesn't happen, the resentment brews like poison. Suddenly, their kindness feels conditional. Their generosity turns sharp. The smile fades, and you're left feeling like a villain for not reading their mind. What makes covert contracts so emotionally explosive is the betrayal on both sides. The manipulator feels betrayed because you broke the deal. You feel betrayed because the love or care you received wasn't real. It was bait. It's a quiet form of control that punishes you for failing to honor an agreement you never signed. And the worst part? If you confront them, they'll deny everything. I never said I expected anything. They'll paint themselves as the martyr, and you as the ungrateful one. That's how covert contracts turn caring into a weapon, and silence into a trap. Foot in the mouth technique. The foot in the mouth technique is a disturbingly subtle manipulation method that disarms people by first appealing to their empathy before making a request. It works by creating a moment of psychological vulnerability, a small crack in someone's emotional armor, through a simple human question. How are you feeling today? It seems innocent, harmless, even kind, but behind it lies a calculated move to increase compliance. Here's how it works. The manipulator asks about your well-being. It could be casual, "Hope your day's going well," or more direct, "How are you holding up?" This softens your defenses. Most people instinctively respond politely, often saying they're fine or good, regardless of how they really feel. That tiny exchange creates a mental contradiction. If I'm doing okay, I should be helpful. I shouldn't say no. That's the trap. Right after this moment of vulnerability, the manipulator makes their request. It might be small, a favor, a concession, a bit of your time, but because you've just affirmed that you're doing well, and because they've shown concern, saying no feels emotionally wrong. You don't want to seem cold, uncooperative, ungrateful, so you agree without realizing you've just been cornered
Šta
by your own
probavaš?
social conditioning. What makes this tactic so dangerous is that it plays on politeness
Evo,
and
dobili
guilt.
smo odgovor
It
za
turns your
symbol stop.
empathy into a weapon against
Kakav
you,
odgovor?
and you don't even see it coming. You
Pa
think
koji
you're
će
being
tek biti?
kind,
Lupamo glavu, ja
reasonable,
ovaj se
helpful,
vita šta će
but in
biti.
truth, you're being
Eto, dobili
manipulated
ste.
by
Nemojte
someone
lupati
who
glavu, lupajte
understands
kompjuter,
exactly how to
tastaturu i sve
bypass
ostalo.
your defenses.
To.
Salespeople use it. Bosses use it.
Aš
Even
igaro,
friends and family use it,
japanski točka
often without
šlovaca,
realizing they're
jebinski,
doing it.
šta neće
It
se
works
izmisliti.
best in moments where you're distracted
Jebi
or
ga.
emotionally off balance.
Gdje ti
The
trčiš da
question
kupiš
feels
ga, jel?
personal, even caring. And that's
Tako
what
je, idem
gives
da
it
platim
power.
račune.
It's not aggressive.
Znači,
It's
Bože.
not a demand. It's a soft
I to
pressure
moram da idem
wrapped in false warmth. You feel like
ili
you
u
have a
centar
choice,
Zeuna
but
da obično
everything
bude
about the
gužva,
setup makes
ili
Dobro.
idem sada
applying feel
na
like you're
autobus
violating
u tržni
an
centar na Novom
unspoken
Beogradu,
social rule.
da
By
tamo
the time
platim
you
račun
realize
ovaj,
what just happened, you're already saying
babi
yes,
televiziju da plati,
smiling,
pošto se vodi na moje
agreeable,
ime.
cooperative. And
A
the
ja se
Aha.
vodim da
request you
živim
would
kod
have
babe.
refused in a
Ajde,
different
samo opušteno,
context
znači.
is
Trč,
now your
trč,
responsibility.
brzo to.
All because someone asked how you were doing.
Nema šta se da
Reverse
trči, znači.
psychology, inversion.
Gdje ti meni reci kako
psychology,
da
also known as
ramujem nekoga za
inversion,
300
is a
damage-a
subtle but
danas u
deeply
ovom
manipulative
eventu.
technique that operates by exploiting human resistance.
Hvala,
It
imate
works by
još sve i tenka.
suggesting the opposite of what you
Nemam.
actually want someone to
Osmicu
do,
nemam.
knowing that their instinct to rebel, prove autonomy,
A to
or
namjeričkom
assert
onom, a?
control
Da.
will drive them to do exactly what
Pa
you
ne znam sa
intended
čime
all
vi.
along.
Imam
Nedavni
T,
sajver.
Game of suggestion and defiance,
T69,
where the real power lies
Bulldog
in
je
pretending to give
T28.
it up. At its core, reverse psychology
Najbolje bi bilo uzeti
triggers
Bulldoga
one
i
of our
ganje
most
drugog lajta
primal
i zabiti se u njega.
psychological needs, the need for
Pa
freedom.
samo ti ako nemaš
When
skill za
people
ramolj.
feel like their choices are being restricted,
Jebote
their
sunce,
natural
sad ću ga
response is to push
napraviti.
back.
Sad ću ga
It's
napraviti.
called reactance, an emotional
Znači,
response that makes us want
ali
to
opet to ti
reclaim
isto si
our
baš uzeo
autonomy
jednog od
the
najmekših
moment we sense
lakih
it's under
tenkova.
threat. The
Pa da nemaš tu
genius of
nešto mnogo
reverse psychology
tvrđih.
is in
Možda
weaponizing
jedno
that
je,
instinct.
ne
Say
znam
you're
sad prema
dealing with
to
someone
je
stubborn or
T28 je,
Bilažija čini
T28 je previše spor, neko se treba zabiti u mene.
T28
But
prototip,
if
a
you say,
A,
you
obični.
probably won't go for
Samo
it.
naprijed.
It's not really your thing.
Ona je prije
Their ego.
T95.
jest.
Suddenly, they want to
Jest.
prove you wrong. The idea becomes
Nemamo
theirs.
šanse,
They
znači.
feel in control.
Uzet ću
When
lajta
Treba ti
pa
neka
ću...
budala
they're
shvatim
playing into the
tenkom
very
da se zavije od
outcome
tebe.
you planted
Tako je.
like a seed. This tactic is often used on children, rebels, and authority-averse
Čekam po
personalities,
2,5
but
minuta,
it's just
znači,
as
za partiju.
powerful in adult relationships, negotiations,
I dobijem
and
jebeni,
sex.
i dobijem
A manipulator
rudnik
might
jebeni
say,
Mines.
You probably won't want to be with someone like me, knowing that
Dobro,
the
nema
listener
neka
will feel
nizbrdica.
compelled to
Pa da
defend
možeš.
their interest. The moment you make something feel out of reach
Osim ako ne
or
skočiš gore na
disapproved
neku
of,
budalu
it becomes
Ma
desirable.
znam.
koja
It's
se
not
pribila od
logic.
skama.
It's
Ja.
emotional rebellion.
KV5.
Ide na
The dark
jahanje.
power of
KV5,
reverse
jedino ako se on
psychology
zabije u
lies
mene,
in its deniability.
iako mu
If
napravim
confronted,
više od 300
the
damage-a, bilo bi
manipulator
dobro.
can
Malo
say,
prije sam napravio
"I never told you to do it."
150-200.
That's the cruelty of inversion. It lets you lead people while pretending you are
Ali nisam
leading
mogao
them.
napraviti
Ovo je
300.
It builds the illusion of independence while guiding their choices with invisible strings, and the victim never realizes the
Ne
manipulation.
vezi.
They think it was their own idea.
Igrat ću
They feel
sahat
smart
vremena
for
pa ću vidjeti
proving you wrong.
kakve sam nesreći.
Meanwhile, you're smiling, knowing you never
Je,
wanted them
to.
to agree. You wanted them to resist.
Ali,
That resistance
ali
is the
razočaraš
doorway.
me.
That resistance
Točkaša
is the
neće
trap.
ići 60 na 100, tiće
Gaslighting
40.
by omission.
Strašno.
Gaslighting
Evo ga,
by
KV5
omission
se
is
zalijeći.
a particularly cruel form of
U
psychological
BZ
manipulation,
176.
where the abuser doesn't lie outright. They simply leave out key details that distort your entire sense of reality.
KV5 nije
It's
loš.
not what they say,
Ali
it's what
treba,
they don't say that
ali to je
breaks you.
dobar i on
This tactic
za
slowly
ramovanje u
makes
tim
you
eventima,
question
ono
your
zimski
memory,
onaj event,
your
kad nam
instincts,
kao što je
and
prošao ono.
eventually
Da.
your
Uradiš
sanity.
mu još i turbo,
Not through confrontation,
uradiš mu
but
da mu
through
ne spadaju
silence.
gusenice, da ga ne
It
trakuju
begins subtly. You notice gaps.
i samo
Things don't
driftaš.
quite add up.
Tu nije loš,
There's
još
no
mu
clear
ubaciš.
evidence of deceit.
Umjesto
Da.
onih
Partner
silnih
leaves out part of
opravki
where they
hrane,
were.
ubaciš
A
mu
friend fails to mention
ono
something
oktansko gorivo za 10%
A
na
boss
snagu motora.
forgets to tell you a detail that would have changed your entire decision. You start
I onda
sensing
može
something's
još
off,
brže malo.
but when you ask,
10,
you're met with
10%.
calm deflection. I didn't
I
think
onda
it
može,
mattered.
staviš mu i one krampone mu
Must have
staviš.
misunderstood.
Iako se krampona mu staviš, nema pojma, neki brz oprav.
Because you weren't told
Ono
the
opravo,
lie, you
isprobavao
can't
sam ne
prove
ove
it.
godine nego
You start
prošle godine.
doubting your
Ja.
Sam
perceptions,
isprobavao u tom
your
događaju,
emotional
dobar je bio.
responses. You replay
Ajmo sve to
conversations
staviš.
over and
Ne ti
over
skinu
again,
gusenice ni
trying to
tišta,
find
znači
what you missed.
skidaš
Ja.
ono
Truth was
hiljadarku.
never there. It was
A se dobro
withheld.
skucaš u
The
nekog
silence
pačnika,
was the
ako se
weapon.
skucaš u nekog
Gaslighting by omission
ljepskog
thrives in
mediuma prođeto tipa tako nešto,
charged
možda mu skineš i full.
relationships. The manipulator
Da.
carefully curates the narrative, feeding you only
Kao ja nikad mu ne
to
skinem full,
compliant,
obično ga prvom
confused,
granatom
or
trekam ili
dependent.
tako nešto i onda se
No.
slupam u njega.
Context that
U
would
što ono
empower
napravi.
you. They omit truths
Ako ga ne
that would
omašim, ako
reveal
mu ne
their
sjebe
patterns.
drift.
They erase timelines, omit names, skip over motivations, all while maintaining a mask of innocence. It feels like you're losing your grip.
Vidio sam sad
when in
testiraju ovog
reality,
novog.
they're tightening theirs. This form of
Mislim da
gaslighting
je
is
auto
deeply
loader, šta je ovaj,
damaging
kako
because
se
it leaves
zove?
no
Dobro.
fingerprints.
Šta?
You're left explaining what wasn't said.
Američki lovac,
You feel
desetka
paranoid,
sa
but
topom
can't
onim
pinpoint
fugasnim,
why.
kako se zove.
That confusion
Prva
turns
granata mu je
inward.
hit
You
320
blame
mm, koliko već.
become
Ne
anxious,
Druga
znam.
mu je hit 265, a isto skida, sačuvaj Bože.
that desperate
Aha.
Negdje ga imam u telefonu.
over time.
Ima jebeš to u
Ima
telefonu
ga na
što ima.
skillu. Ima ga na skillovom sajtu onome.
Ja.
Ja sam vidio u specifikacijama i vidio sam kad Vara Gaming izbacio, ali rekao to će biti isto thing.
Aha.
Ako je, ne mogu sad sjetiti mi autoloader, nije. Znači ideš i i spamaš te granate, one 265 mm, znači. Čekam kad će da ubaci onu neku mehaniku, logičku mehaniku kako se zove, kad ređeš granate, hoće da ti prva bude AP, druga hoće da ti bude, na primjer, hit. Ta dvojka, ono, kako se zove. To me nervira kod Italijana me nervira kod njihovog sistema punjenja, što nisu namestili logični sistem punjenja kod ostalih autoreloadera. Da prebaci sve granate, samo ti prebaci prvu granatu i onda ostale 2-3 puniš standardno. Ja rekao, ne onda mi nema neke velike svrhe imati intuiciju na tim tenkovima lajde. Tako kad prebaci samo prvu granatu. Italijanima.
Da.
Samo ti prvu prebaci, ne prebaci ti ostale 2-3, razumeš? Ostale 2-3 puniš normalno. Ja rekao ti, ja čekam samo.
Tamo se, znači na tim autoreloaderima se ne isplati uopšte imati intuiciju, ne isplati se imati 2-3 granate, znači samo jednu, samo gold, premium i pičiš.
Pa to zavisi, ako je prva APCR ona brzinska, a druga hit spora, to onda mi se, kako se zove, i sad ti držaš prvu ko na Projeto 65, onda mi je bolje kako se zove prvu. Ima koliko 1400-1500 tu brzinu, pa može na daljinu da pogađa, to je dobro.
A gledaj sad ovo,
borbu.
a onda, ja ne kontam uopšte, znači, autoloaderi i ostale te budalaštine, znači samo zlatne. Samo jedan tip i nema mijenjanja, znači samo pumpaš i gotovo.
Naravno, to opet zavisi od stila igre. Na ovom 50B, ajde još i nekako kako se zove, ali ovo je na T57 je bilo poželjno da si ima AP, kako se zove iz razloga što je to AP, druga i hit neće proći kroz onaj Space Armor. AP može, AP još je za to dobra. A sad da radiš samo kada je 250 i nešto milimetara. To samo možeš ove neke na donju ploču da ganjaš nekome ako je na blizu, a na ostale teškaše mausa i ostalo samo od dvojka, znači ništa. Ali opet ćeš da prednjačiš sa dvojkama manje više. Mislim, meni posluži i obično, zavisi od situacije, kažem, zavisi od situacije.
Ja.
Gdje krene, ne kažem da nisu koristili, na T57 sam više koristio dvojku nego prvo. Na 50B maltene i ni koristim prvu, uglavnom odmah napunim dvojku, znam šta me čeka. Idem na staranu gdje su ovi tvrđi pa se pomolim da me APCR ne izda.
Ja.
Zato više sa 50B vidim da idu po tim snajperskim pozicijama nego sa T57. Na T57 i ne može da snajper iz razloga što ima spore granati, prva i druga mu je spora. Rinoceronta sam počeo da koristim. Prvo biti mi se nije sviđao rinoceronta iz razloga što ti ukupali polica municiji. I to odmah sa desne strane, ja mislim da nije sve nego sa desne. I ja kad izlađe negdje s desne strane u kupolu deća kod nema telo i odvode munice. Sad poslije to se popravili malo i koristio se jedno vremena, onda su popravili T57, onda se opet T57 više koristi. Onda sviđa mi se taj tip granate, ovaj ima AP, APCR, ovaj ima AP hit, ovaj ima APCR hit, tako da...
420 sam se zabio u bleska.
Pa to je to.
Znači, direktno, znači, samo pičio, pucao on u mene, ja pucao u njega, 300 on meni, ja njam 400. I završeno, znači, i završeno je to, znači, idemo sada ubiti nekoga ko ima novčić.
To ti kažem. Samo za ramovanje onaj neština i to je to.
Ma kako, ja samo krenuo, ništa nisam prebacio, ništa nisam napravio. Evo udarni se voza oko nas. Eno, predaju novčić. Predali su novčić. Sad trebam ponovno, sad kad sam to riješio, sad mi je sve lagano, znači, opušteno. Spirit znači stepica, na sredini je novčić i laganica, kafanica, znači idem spotam.
You no longer defend yourself, not because you can't, but because you don't believe you're allowed to. You've been trained to betray your own limits.
Vidi čovjeka šta radi.
Love bombing is a psychological manipulation technique that hides its claws inside affection, intensity, and overwhelming attention. At first, it feels like a dream, like you finally found someone who sees you, cherishes you, chooses you without hesitation. They shower you with compliments, constant messages, long grand gestures. You're the center of their world. You feel special, chosen, safe. But beneath the flood of adoration lies a calculated trap. This
Udarni!
is control dressed as passion. The purpose of love bombing is not to give, it's to hook. It overwhelms your emotional defenses.
Opa, dečak, to, nabij me u guzu kad sam ti je pokazao.
Before you've had time to think. Healthy relationships build trust gradually. Love bombing speeds past boundaries, accelerating intimacy at a dangerous pace, all while keeping you too
Sad me
emotionally
naprijed probi.
intoxicated to notice the red flags. The manipulator studies your needs, your wounds, your insecurities, your desires, and reflects back the exact version of the partner you've always hoped for. They say things like, I've never felt this way about anyone. Or so, I can't live without you, within days or weeks.
Druškane, brži sam od Kan Pancera 2 što se ovrti u krug.
It's about what they can get from you once you're addicted to the high. Because the high,
No!
after the love bombing phase, the affection becomes inconsistent. They pull away, criticize you.
Ajde, to, završi, predaj novčić i gotovo. Idem u sljedeću partiju da vidim da li sam napravio 300 ili nisam napravio 300.
Suddenly, you're working for crumbs of validation from the same person who once drowned you in it. And that's the second phase of the trap.
Tako da što se toga tiče samo lagano, znači, a ono govno uzmi ako hoćeš. 13 poena, yes please, završio sam.
You excuse the emotional whiplash,
250 bondova. I 700 damage što Spirit po 60 tank treba.
It was bait. Love bombing isn't affection.
Vidim ja nešto oni ne objavili tokom cijele nedjelje ništa od još od 13. razumeš? A najavili sutra patch notes 19. i meni odmah, ali ne pišu šta, kaže samo kao patch notes ti se disos neki, ono, i greška se ispravlja neke, znaš.
Ma ja.
Isto je neki. A ono ubacuju ovoga, znači, svi čudno jebote. Znaš, ono, sreda je nisu ništa objavili, ono, ponedjeljak, utorak, nije valjda će cijela nedjelja proći bez ničega, ali vidiš neće.
Ma ja.
Pobunici oni prostor, kako se zove. A čini ništa ne objavili tako 2-3 dana, nešto smišljaju.
This tactic is subtle, strategic, and deeply effective.
Pripremio sam jedno 900.000 slobodnog i ostatak ću dati nešto bondove. Imam bondova sad već. To je 14-115.000, tako nešto.
Aha. Pa dobar.
A friend conveniently forgets to tell you something they told everyone else. These gaps in truth aren't random, they're crafted. The manipulator isn't silent because they forgot. They're silent because knowledge is power. And keeping you uninformed keeps you powerless. It traps you in a space of uncertainty where you can't trust your own judgment because you're missing essential pieces of the puzzle. Your instincts whisper that something feels off, but you can't prove it. You question your gut, your memory, your worth. What makes information withholding emotionally devastating is its ability to erode trust without confrontation. The manipulator gets to appear innocent. They didn't lie. They didn't yell. They simply didn't say anything.
O, zabij se u njega, Duška, daj.
I didn't think it mattered. You never asked. Or the classic, I was protecting you. Suddenly, you're the one who feels unreasonable for wanting the truth. In relationships, this tactic breaks intimacy while pretending to preserve it. It creates emotional distance. You begin to doubt what you know, and worse, what you deserve to know. The manipulator becomes the gatekeeper of truth, and you become dependent on their selective storytelling for a sense of reality. It's the quietest kind of control. Not loud, not violent, just empty air where truth should be. And in that emptiness,
Are se. Majmune jedan, što si išao dole?
Until one day you realize you weren't loved, supported, or respected. You were managed, kept just informed enough to stay close, but never enough to feel free. Guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is a psychological weapon that doesn't need shouting, threats, or force. It only needs your conscience. It is the art of turning your sense of morality, responsibility, or love against you, making you feel like the villain simply for having needs, boundaries, or independence. This tactic works by making you feel bad for something you shouldn't feel bad about, and then using that emotion to control you. It starts with subtle comments, sighs, or emotional withdrawals. You say no, and they say, I guess I'll just do it myself. Like always, you speak up for yourself, and they respond with, after everything I've done for you, they don't need to attack you directly. They just plant the seed, and that seed grows into shame, into self-doubt, into the aching need to make things right, even when you've done nothing wrong. That's the trap. Guilt tripping hijacks your empathy. The manipulator knows you care, so they weaponize that care. They paint themselves as the victim of your choices, no matter how justified or healthy those choices are. Suddenly, saying I need space makes you selfish. Prioritizing your mental health means you're abandoning them. They twist the narrative so you're the one who ends up apologizing for simply trying to protect yourself. The worst part is, guilt tripping often comes from people you love. Parents, partners, friends, people who know exactly where your emotional pressure points are. They don't ask directly, they imply. They don't argue, they withdraw love. And when they see the remorse in your eyes, the softening of your voice, the weakening of your resolve, they know it worked. You comply, not out of agreement, but out of guilt. And in doing so, you reinforce the very behavior that's manipulating you. Every time you give in, you teach them that all they have to do is hurt your heart a little, and they'll get what they want. This isn't emotional honesty, it's emotional extortion. It's designed to make you betray yourself so they don't have to feel uncomfortable. And once you learn to carry guilt that isn't yours, it becomes a leash they pull whenever you try to walk away. Disqualification. Push-pull. Disqualification, commonly known as the push-pull technique, is a psychological manipulation tactic designed to create intense emotional dependence by sending mixed signals: closeness followed by sudden distance, affection followed by coldness, validation followed by rejection. It's emotional whiplash, and it's not accidental. It's a deliberate strategy to keep you chasing approval you can never quite catch. It starts with the pull. The manipulator showers you with attention, admiration, charm. They make you feel special, chosen. You begin to believe you're safe in their presence. You drop your guard, you invest. Then, just as the bond begins to feel real, they push you away. They withdraw emotionally. They criticize you, mock you, go silent, or suddenly become cold and distant, and you're left spinning. What did I do wrong? What changed? Why did they turn on me? That confusion is exactly the point. Your nervous system goes into overdrive. You try harder. You apologize even when you didn't do anything wrong. You chase that initial high, the warmth, the attention, the connection, like an addict trying to recreate the first hit. And every now and then, just as you're about to give up, they pull you back in. A kind word, a thoughtful gesture, a moment of softness. Your heart leaps. Maybe things are okay again. But they never are. Not for long. This back and forth dynamic becomes your new emotional reality. The push makes you feel insecure, while the pull gives temporary relief. So your brain ties comfort to the person who also caused the pain. and that's the manipulation. They become the wound and the bandage. You don't see them as toxic. You see them as salvation. You cling to them not because you feel good, but because you felt good once and desperately want it back. Disqualification turns your self-esteem into a yo-yo, rising and falling at their whim. They may tease you under the guise of flirting, give you praise followed by a sharp dig, or act possessive one day and indifferent the next. Every push undermines your confidence. Every pull gives you just enough hope to stay. It's calculated inconsistency, weaponized to make you doubt yourself, question your worth, and stay hooked on someone who keeps rewriting the rules of connection just to stay in control. Micro-invalidations. Micro-invalidations are subtle, often indirect dismissals that erode your sense of reality, identity, or experience, one small wound at a time. They don't look like outright cruelty. They're quiet, passive, often disguised as jokes, casual remarks, or even advice. But their power lies in repetition. Each one chips away at your confidence, your voice, your sense that you even have the right to feel what you feel. You say you're tired, and they say, you don't know what tired is. You express excitement about a goal, and they shrug, well, don't get your hopes up. You talk about something that hurts you, and they reply, that's just life. Everyone goes through it. You speak your truth, and they smile. You're being too sensitive. On their own, these comments may seem harmless, even normal, but that's exactly what makes them dangerous, because they're not loud enough to spark confrontation, but they're sharp enough to leave scars. And when they come from someone you trust, a parent, partner, friend, or mentor, the damage cuts even deeper. You begin to question yourself. Am I overreacting? Was that really a big deal? Maybe my feelings are too much. That's the trap. Micro-invalidations train you to shrink yourself, to doubt your emotions before you even express them. They teach you that your experiences aren't valid unless someone else approves of them. And over time, you internalize that message. You stop sharing. You suppress. You apologize for existing in your own story. The silence becomes protection and also your prison. Manipulators use this tactic with surgical precision. It lets them undercut your confidence without ever raising their voice. They appear reasonable, realistic, even well-meaning, but behind every subtle dismissal is the same message. You don't matter as much as you think you do. What makes micro-invalidation so insidious is that they never come all at once. They arrive in moments, repeated, normalized, and dismissed. But the damage accumulates. Like drops of poison in water, they eventually change the way you see yourself, quietly, permanently, and without leaving visible bruises. Forced teaming. Forced teaming is a covert psychological manipulation tactic where the manipulator creates a false sense of partnership with you by using language and behavior that implies shared fate, mutual goals, or aligned emotions, when in reality, there is none. It's the illusion of unity, manufactured solely to lower your defenses and fast-track your trust. And the most dangerous part? It often feels like someone being friendly. This tactic starts with subtle wording. We're in this together. Let's figure this out. Looks like we've got a little problem, don't we? The manipulator uses inclusive language. We, us, our, to manufacture closeness
Ma opušteno, samo lagano, znači.
Even when they're a stranger or outsider. That simple shift in language triggers a deep psychological reflex. Humans are tribal by nature. We're wired to protect those in our group, to bond with those who share our struggles. And that's the weapon. Forced teaming is often used in moments of vulnerability. A stranger offers to help you carry something, then says, we make a good team. A coworker takes your idea, then says, we're in this fight together, right? A toxic partner gets caught lying and says, we just have to fix this, you and me. Each time, you're
Dobro, samo ćemo li šta blokirati?
What makes forced teaming so sinister is how harmless it appears on the surface. It mimics connection without actually earning it. You feel pressure to reciprocate the illusion, to be polite, agreeable, cooperative. But behind that false sense of unity is a manipulator who wants something: your trust, your compliance, your silence. This technique is a favorite among predators and con artists because it fast-tracks intimacy. If they can get you to see them as us, you'll let them in, into your space, into your mind, into your decisions. And when things go wrong, they'll make you feel like you're both responsible. But the truth is, you were never on the same team. The connection was forged without consent. The alliance was spoken into existence, not built. And once you see it, you realize the we was never about you. It was always a strategy to get past your guard without ever earning your trust. Minimization. Minimization is a psychological manipulation.
No, for fuck's sake.
The severity of your experiences, feelings, or pain in order to gain control, deflect responsibility, or silence confrontation. It doesn't deny what happened. It just tells you it wasn't that bad. And in doing so, it erodes your ability to trust your own perception of reality. You say something hurts you, and they say, "You're overreacting." You express anger, and they respond, "It was just a joke." You confront them about something serious, and they sigh, "I didn't mean it like that. You're too sensitive." You cry, and they coldly reply, "This again?"
Kako ti mene možeš pogoditi, Bog te mazo? A gotovo je. Nije settings, nego back to garage. Idemo sljedeći tank, znači nema popušiona, idemo dalje. Nema, niti će dobiti 3 poena za pobjedu, niti će šta uraditi. Završimo prije. Daj da napravimo onaj...
It teaches you to second guess your emotional reality. Over time, you start shrinking your voice. You soften your words, question your instincts, and suppress your emotions before they ever leave your lips. Why? Because you already know the script. You already know your hurt will be met with dismissal, and so the silence becomes safer than the truth. Minimization is a favorite tool of abusers, narcissists, and toxic authority figures. It allows them to say, "I didn't hit you that hard. I was just stressed." It's not like I cheated on you. They shift the focus away from what they did and onto how you're reacting. Suddenly, the problem isn't their behavior, it's your response to it. And that is the core of minimization, turning their offense into your fault. This manipulation doesn't just cause emotional confusion, it creates emotional isolation. Because if someone you trust tells you over and over again that what you're feeling isn't real, eventually you start believing them. You start apologizing for your tears. You start saying it's fine when it's not. You downplay your own suffering to survive the relationship. But inside, the wound festers because it was real. It did hurt. And it was never just a joke. Future faking. Future faking is a manipulative psychological tactic where someone makes grand promises about the future to gain control, commitment, or emotional investment in the present without any intention of actually following through. It's hope weaponized, a dream dangled just far enough out of reach to keep you chasing it, even as reality tells you nothing is changing. It often begins during the honeymoon phase of a relationship, a job offer, or a sales pitch. You're told about all the amazing things that are just around the corner. We're going to move in together. You're on track for a big promotion. Someday, I'm going to give you everything you've ever wanted. These visions are painted in vivid detail, so vivid you can already feel them. You get emotionally attached to a future that hasn't happened, and worse, probably never will. What makes future faking so dangerous is how deeply it exploits human psychology. We're naturally drawn to hope. We crave meaning, purpose, and something to believe in. The manipulator knows this. They don't need to show up fully in the present because they've sold you a future version of themselves, the one who will be ready, will commit, will change. So you stay, you wait, you invest, you shrink your own needs for the sake of what might be. But that future keeps getting pushed further out. There's always a reason why now isn't the right time. There's always something you need to fix, something they need to figure out. And every time you get close to calling it out, they drop another fantasy. We're almost there. I'm working on it. You just have to be patient. These promises become emotional currency, just enough to buy your silence, your loyalty, your time. Over time, the gap between their words and their actions becomes a chasm, but you cling to the hope they gave you because giving up means admitting you were lied to, that your love, your effort, your belief was used as leverage, that you fell for a version of someone that never truly existed. And so you stay, not for who they are, but for the fantasy of who they said they'd become, not because they showed up, but because they promised they would. Silent treatment. The silent treatment is one of the most psychologically cruel
Evo ga debilana opet.
It punishes you with absence, not of presence, but of emotional connection. It is the deliberate withdrawal of communication, affection, and acknowledgement used to create uncertainty, guilt, and desperation in the person being targeted. On the surface, it looks like someone just needs space, but in truth, it's about control. This isn't quiet, it's calculated. The silence is not peaceful, it's loud with meaning. It says, you are invisible, you are not worth my words, you don't matter enough for me to acknowledge. And that absence
What the fuck?
than any scream ever could. It leaves you pacing mentally, replaying every interaction, obsessing over what you did wrong, and scrambling to fix something that's never clearly explained.
Tak te boli briga.
That's the power of the silent treatment. It
Platio
makes you
račun.
beg for
Jesi li?
resolution, even when they cause the damage.
Malo
In the beginning,
popričao s
it
ovom
often
plavušom.
comes after a disagreement.
Zašto ja dobijam majmune, znači,
No eye contact,
koji,
no messages,
koji su prejaki ili majmune koji vidio, moji su pokupili novčić i dali novčiće. Ja treba da ubijem nekoga koji ima novčić. Bog te mazu. Ne dam mi se,
Ti je
znači.
kontra.
A?
Pa ti kažem, to je sve kontra od onoga što tebi treba.
A,
Kad ti nije trebalo, ja sam bio više. Po trojstvo plus u partiji sa tim novčićem. A kad mi je trebalo taj dan za misiju, trebalo mi je preko 20 nešto biti.
To seek connection, that our brains treat social rejection like physical pain. So they exploit that vulnerability by making you suffer in the silence, knowing that the longer it lasts, the more compliant.
Ajde, objekat. Idi uzmi ga, Bog te mazo, da pokušam da te nabijem.
Speak to you again. It feels like relief, like rescue. You're so grateful for the end of the torment that you don't question the method. You accept the unspoken lesson. Speak less, demand less, trigger less, just so you don't get frozen out again. That's
Dobro, šta je mene tu spotalo? Objekat, jel?
Not through violence, but through void. Not by breaking you loudly, but by disappearing just long enough for you to break yourself. Moral licensing. Moral licensing is a psychological trap where doing something good gives someone perceived permission to do something bad, as if their past virtue creates a moral credit they can now spend. In manipulation, this becomes a weapon. The manipulator uses their previous acts of kindness, generosity, or morality to shield, justify, or excuse harmful behavior. It's the ultimate emotional
Predo novčić.
Look at all I've done.
Tako, završimo znači za 3 minute i doviđenja.
This tactic doesn't just distort behavior, it distorts judgment. A partner who once showed immense love and sacrifice now uses that memory like armor. When they lie, you forgive them because they once defended you. When they ignore your needs, you hesitate to complain because they're not a bad person. They've done so much for me. But that's the trap.
700
Your
damage.
mind begins weighing the past against the present instead of seeing what's happening now. Moral licensing creates emotional confusion. You feel guilty for being hurt. You doubt yourself for noticing the manipulation. You minimize your feelings because their past goodness looms over your current pain. And the manipulator leans into that hesitation. After everything I've done, you're seriously going to question me? I've been there for you. One mistake and suddenly I'm the villain? They don't take accountability. They cash in on your loyalty. In more public or professional spaces, this tactic becomes even more insidious. Leaders, bosses, or authority figures will point to their track record of fairness or altruism to mask exploitation or abuse. I support everyone. You know that. I've always been ethical. Meanwhile, their current actions tell another story, one they expect you to ignore. The terrifying part of moral licensing is how it can take root in your own psyche. You begin excusing mistreatment because it doesn't match your image of the person. You start negotiating your pain.
Zašto kasnite, Bog vas mazao? I zašto se samo dvojica bogtaju?
Your boundaries erode, not through threats, but through remembered kindness.
Ajde ba, druškane, KPZ.
Don't cancel bad behavior, but moral licensing.
Ajde, zauzmi ga, Bog te je.
It turns virtue into camouflage and makes you feel like
Evo ga,
is
nećeš.
being unfair for noticing the betrayal behind it. Tactical ignorance. Tactical ignorance is the deliberate act of pretending not to notice, know, or understand something in order to manipulate outcomes, avoid accountability, or force others into
Jel nećete uzeti? Evo ga, daj da vas pobijem.
It's strategic.
Gdje da vas pobijem onda ako nećete uzimati, idemo sljedeću, znači...
Absolutely did know, but chose to play dumb because it keeps them in power while making you feel crazy, burdensome, or responsible. This manipulation is particularly effective because it hides in plain sight. It's incredibly difficult to call out someone who just acts confused. They don't have to lie outright. They simply omit, delay, deflect. And while you're wasting time explaining, repeating...
Bravo, ti mene pogodi, ja tebe ne mogu i.
Sit back and watch you unravel, because the goal of tactical ignorance isn't to understand, it's to exhaust. They forget your boundaries, even though you've clearly stated.
Ajde nazad malo.
They misinterpret your emotions, even though you've explained them more than once. They ignore obvious problems, consequences, or needs while insisting, I didn't realize it was that serious. It's not clumsiness, it's control. Every time you repeat yourself,
Ajde, druškane, idi, zauzmi bojim.
Again, they gain more leverage. They make you the one who looks overly emotional, irrational, or demanding. This tactic thrives in relationships where there's an imbalance of power. A partner doesn't follow through on what they promised, and when confronted, they say, oh, I didn't know that mattered so much to you. A boss doesn't address your concerns, but later claims, I wasn't aware you felt that way. A parent overlooks your trauma.
Bravo, uzmi ga, Bog te mazo.
They knew, but acknowledging it would require responsibility, and tactical ignorance is the perfect escape hatch. It works because it manipulates expectations. You assume they didn't mean harm. You give the benefit of the doubt. You question whether you made yourself clear.
Prebacim ti Matijev, ti prebacim.
They remain untouched, smiling, innocent, protected by the veil of not knowing. But make no mistake, tactical ignorance is not ignorance at all. It's emotional theater, carefully played to keep the blame off them
Sad se
and the
sjetio.
burden on you. The less they claim to understand, the more
Pusti ga nek uzme da ga non stop vidim.
the more they win. By pretending they don't
380.
even know there was a
Ej, jebi
game.
ga sada.
Flooding, overwhelm tactic. Flooding, also known as the overwhelm tactic, is a psychological manipulation strategy where the abuser bombards you with excessive information, intense emotion, rapid-fire demands, or chaotic behavior, all at once, to disorient your thinking and shut down your ability to resist. It's not designed to hurt you outright. It's designed to overload your brain until it breaks your will. It's emotional shock warfare disguised as urgency. This tactic often comes out of nowhere. One moment, things seem calm. The next, you're hit with a sudden outburst, a flood of accusations, dramatic gestures, or an avalanche of expectations you're somehow supposed to meet right now. You don't have time to think, let alone respond clearly. Your nervous system goes into panic mode. Fight, flight, or freeze. and most often, you freeze. That paralysis is the goal. In a state of overwhelm, your critical thinking shuts down. Your need for peace overrides your need for truth. So you concede, you apologize, you agree to things you don't fully understand. You submit just to make it stop. But the manipulator isn't chaotic by accident. They're performing chaos to force submission. Their intensity isn't a loss of control. It is the control. Flooding is used by abusers during arguments to dominate the narrative, yelling so loudly or rapidly that you can't get a word in. It's used in toxic workplaces where unreasonable deadlines, stacked meetings, and last-minute demands keep you so busy you can't reflect on what's fair. It's used in love bombing too, lavishing you with praise, gifts, and intensity so quickly you mistake it for genuine connection instead of manipulation. It's all flooding. And over time, this tactic creates conditioning. You begin avoiding confrontation altogether. You walk on eggshells. You try to manage everything ahead of time to prevent another emotional ambush. You don't speak your needs. You suppress them to avoid the flood. That silence becomes a form of self-betrayal, all born from a survival instinct the manipulator engineered. What makes flooding terrifying is its invisibility. To outsiders, it might just look like a heated conversation, a demanding boss, a passionate partner, but to you, it's emotional drowning. And every time you survive it, you come out a little more exhausted, a little more compliant, and a lot more unsure of your right to breathe. Bait and blame. Bait and blame is a psychological manipulation tactic that lures you into reacting, emotionally, defensively, or even just honestly, only to twist your response into proof that you are the problem. It's the emotional equivalent of a trap, baited with provocation and set to snap the moment you speak up. This isn't just about starting conflict. It's about creating a no-win scenario where you are punished for simply responding. It often begins with something small, a passive-aggressive comment, a vague accusation, a loaded question designed to poke at your vulnerabilities. Maybe they say, "It must be nice not to care," or "Some people just don't know how to be grateful." You feel the sting, the confusion, the pressure to defend yourself. That's the bait. And when you take it, when you react, explain, get upset, or stand up for yourself, they strike. "Wow, you're so sensitive. I was just trying to have a conversation. See, this is why I can't talk to you."